Today, I'm upgrading from the iPhone 13 mini to the iPhone 15 Pro. I've been extremely happy with my 13 mini for the past 2 years, especially with how small it is. This year, Apple announced that the 15 Pro will be made from titanium, it's got the A17 chip, has an action button, USB-C, but as a photographer, I felt like I've been missing out on some of the pro camera features, and the promise of 7 cameras is what really pushed me to purchase this phone. As someone who makes their living shooting photos and videos, having only 2 lenses for the past 2 years has been a bit of a challenge. So when I got my hands on the iPhone 15 Pro and its 7 lenses, it felt like a blessing. However, I don't have the 5x camera, which is reserved for the 15 Pro Max, so I guess I only actually have 6 lenses. And is the macro lens a lens? Let's start with the main lens, which is the camera that we all use the most. The main lens on the iPhone 15 seems to be exactly the same as what we had on the 14 Pro, with some possible improvements that weren't announced in the keynote. We now have the options to change the focal length on the main lens from 24mm to 28mm or 35mm. And this is exciting for photographers because these are the standard, trusted, predictable focal lengths that we're used to using on our cameras. I'm still a little confused on how these lenses work. When I listened to the Apple announcement about these lenses, I assumed that the camera would just be digitally cropping into the sensor. But after watching a few other people's reviews, it seems that Apple is somehow using all of the data on the sensor to get the highest quality image. The best way that I understand this is that rather than having 3' lenses, the phone has a variable zoom lens. The ultra-wide lens is almost exactly the same as on the 14 Pro, and this is one of my favorite lenses to use, especially since it's the widest lens that I have. The quality on this lens is better than my 13 mini, but noticeably not as sharp as the main cameras and noisier in low light. What's new to me is that I can use this ultra-wide lens as a macro lens. This feels more like a feature than it does a lens, but now I have the ability to take extremely close-up, detailed shots. But I'm curious how much I'll actually use this camera or feature. I haven't had a telephoto lens on my phone for a few years, and I've just learned to live without it. But I gotta say, one of my favorite lenses is the 85mm lens. Portrait mode doesn't seem to have any major updates, except for the fact that whenever you're shooting a subject in the frame in your regular shooting mode, the phone will automatically detect that there's a subject in the frame. You can change your focus or blur the background at a later point. This is a great feature because I do love shallow depth of field in my photos, and that's not what you would expect from an iPhone. However, I just don't swipe over and use the portrait mode almost ever. So having the option to decide later if I want my photos to be in portrait mode is a welcomed addition. Since the keynote, I have been curious if this only applies to humans and animals, or if I can use this on any other prominent subject in the frame. I've discovered that if you tap to focus, a little F will appear on your phone, and it will know that you're trying to focus on something, and you can use the portrait mode later. And of course, we still have these weird lighting options that have been there since the beginning. I've never used them, and I'm not starting today. Somebody please explain these things to me. It feels like Apple is really trying to target photo and video people like myself by introducing the addition of HEIF and ProRAW as a way to capture images. These file formats give the images captured all around more detail, as well as more flexibility when editing. The ability to shoot RAW on an iPhone was introduced a couple years ago, and as much as I would like to have the highest quality on all of the photos that I take, time has shown that I have not been using this feature. It looks like I've only ever shot 9 photos in RAW in the past couple of years. Apple announced that we can now tether right from our phones into Capture One, which is the industry standard for tethering. And while I'm skeptical of how often this will actually get used, I'm sure there's some specific use cases where this will. The front-facing camera seems to have all the same specs as last year, and I don't remember anything in the keynote being mentioned about the selfie camera. It's still a 12 megapixel camera, and as of the iPhone 13, there's cinematic photo and video, and as of the 14, there's now autofocus. But I do wish some upgrades were made to this camera, as it seems to be one of the most used cameras on these phones, and it's one of the only places that you can see what you're shooting while you're shooting with it. Don't forget that if you're shooting a photo with the front camera, to press this button to give you a wider angle of view. The majority of the videos that I take on my phone are vertical and usually get sent to my friends or on social media. However, I am always impressed with how incredible the picture looks on these phones straight out of camera. I've shot a couple full YouTube videos using just my phone on this channel before, and I haven't had anybody comment on this yet. I love that Apple has now added a white balance lock that can be toggled on in the settings. On the past few phones, I've noticed that when you're switching between lenses, especially when filming and zooming in, there's a noticeable jump between the lenses. Now, when zooming while shooting a video, you can't noticeably see when the camera lenses are switching. Apple also announced that there is now a new coating on these lenses that will reduce and prevent flaring. In the past, these flares have been very distracting and annoying and pretty obvious that you're filming on an iPhone. Testing this at night, I do see a reduced amount of flares, but I don't think that they're totally gone. Maybe the flares during the day are improved. However, this does not fix the haze that you get on your photos and videos when you have fingerprints on your lens. Make sure that you wipe your lenses whenever you take them out of your pocket, unless you want your images to look like this. Another exciting announcement is that we can now shoot ProRes video right onto an external hard drive. This is great because these large files won't be sitting on your phone taking up all of your space and get transferred immediately to an external hard drive. I assume a company will be making an attachment or hard drive that uses MagSafe to attach the hard drive right to the back of the phone so that the hard drive's out of the way and the cord is short. I discovered that when shooting like this, there's no monitoring LUT and we are looking at a gray image that relies on auto exposure. In my mind, where I think this will be most useful will be run and gun camera situations where the camera size and weight of camera lenses could be an issue, or a shooting situation where you need to get an odd angle, or you're in a dangerous situation where a GoPro or an action camera just won't cut it. A feature that I was hoping that would come to this phone is the ability to pre-record footage. Red cameras have had this feature for years. They can continuously cache footage even when the record button isn't pressed. So when a moment happens and you're too slow to press record, you have a buffer of a few seconds that was recorded before you press the record button, and you haven't missed anything. A couple quick things to note. The stabilization on the video modes of the iPhone have got so much better over the past few years. And with the addition of action mode last year, you can be moving pretty wildly and still get some incredibly usable footage. My one complaint with my iPhone 13 mini was the battery life. On average, I would get 4.5 hours of on-screen time daily, and I'd need to charge my phone 2 to 3 times a day. Without question, every day my battery would be somewhere between 50 to 60% by noon. And you probably think I'm crazy for sticking with a phone like this for so long. However, the trade-off has been well worth it to me, especially since I live in a city where the option to charge is everywhere. So the promise of a larger battery that promises 29 hours of battery is insane. As always, the screen on these phones are absolutely amazing, and the peak brightness on these reaches 2000 nits, which is twice as bright as my previous 13 mini. And it's also nice to have the 120 Hz coming from the 60 Hz screen. Upgrading from my 2-year-old 13 mini, I'm extremely impressed with the features this phone has. Right away, I noticed an upgrade in the photo and video quality, and the ability to have latitude and flexibility to shoot and log is pretty unreal. I think it's finally possible to confidently shoot entire professional videos from your phone. Is an upgrade necessary? Well, that depends. If you're somebody who already shoots a lot on your cameras and maybe even gets paid for shooting on your phone or requires shooting in log, then you probably already have this phone. But if you're somebody who's hoping that this phone will help you take better photos or videos, but you have an iPhone from the past few years, I would say stick with your phone. The image quality is pretty similar, and I've been so impressed with what comes out of phones these past few years. I want to say that I'll be using the RAW and log features on the daily, but because of the file sizes and extra workflow, I think I'll be reserving these for special occasions. Even without the RAW and log enabled, I think that the photo and video straight out of the 15 Pro is incredible, and I'm extremely impressed that all this power fits into my pocket.